There's a moment you know well. Something good is happening, a conversation, a season of your life, a person who makes you feel like yourself. And instead of being in it, you're already doing the math. How long will this last? What happens when it ends? How much will it hurt when it does? You tell yourself that's just being realistic. That's what careful people do. It isn't. What you're actually doing is grieving something that hasn't ended yet. You're living inside a loss that exists only in your mind, while the real thing, the actual conversation, the actual person, the actual moment, sits in front of you untouched. Not because you don't care, because you care so much that you've turned love into a form of dread. This is the central confusion, modern life. We were taught that the problem isn't that things end, that people leave, that nothing lasts. And if that's the problem, the solution seems obvious. Hold tighter, build more security, make it permanent. But the suffering doesn't come from the fact that things end. The suffering comes from the war you wage against that fact. Alan Watts understood this with a precision that most Western philosophy had missed entirely. Asterisk. In 1951, Watts published a book called The Wisdom of Insecurity. It makes a claim that sounds almost offensive in its simplicity. You are suffering not because life is uncertain, but because you cannot stop pretending that it isn't. Every strategy you've developed to feel safe, the identities you maintain, the futures you plan, the relationships you try to control, is an attempt to wrap running water in paper. The water always wins, and each time it does, you don't question the strategy. You just try to wrap it tighter. Watts identified what he called the backwards law, the principle that the harder you pursue certain things, the faster they disappear. Try to stay on the surface of water, and you sink. Hold your breath to keep it, and you lose it. The same logic governs the pursuit of psychological security. The more aggressively you seek it, the more intensely you feel its absence. Not because you're doing it wrong, because the pursuit itself generates the feeling it's trying to eliminate. Here's what the loop actually looks like. You feel insecure about a relationship, a career, your health, your future. So you reach for something solid, a plan, a commitment, a guarantee. And for a moment, it works. The anxiety quiets. But because the world doesn't stop moving, the solid thing shifts. The plan changes. The commitment wavers. The guarantee turns out to be provisional. And now you feel more insecure than before because you invested in permanence, and permanence failed you. So you reach harder. The circle closes. Watts was blunt about where this ends. A society built on the quest for security is, in his words, nothing but a breath retention contest. Everyone's straining, no one breathing. The tension itself mistaken for the point. The craving for security and the feeling of insecurity are not opposites. They are the same thing cycling. You cannot fix a problem that you are generating by trying to fix it. Asterisk. The self you are trying to protect does not exist the way you think it does. This is not a philosophical provocation. It is a description of what happens when you look directly at what you call I and try to locate it. Watts, drawing from Buddhist inquiry and direct observation, noticed something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The self is not a thing. It is a process, a river, not a rock. When you try to observe the I, you find thoughts, feelings, sensations, memories, each one arriving, existing briefly. The sense of a continuous self watching all of this is itself just another thought, a rapid sequence of experiences that memory stitches into the illusion of a stable observer. Watts put it precisely. Consciousness is not a tablet upon which life writes a record. It is the river flowing along with the writing. You are not the same person you were 10 years ago, not just philosophically, biochemically, psychologically, structurally. The body you inhabit has replaced nearly every cell. The beliefs you held have shifted. The things that frightened you have changed. And yet, you carry this feeling of being a continuous, coherent I that has simply moved through time unchanged. That feeling is the convention. The change was the reality all along. When you identify completely with a fixed version of yourself, I am this kind of person, I have always been this way. This is who I am. You are not describing yourself. You are imprisoning yourself. You are taking something fluid and dynamic and insisting it stays still. The person who says, I have always been anxious, is not reporting a fact. They are maintaining a story. The person who says, I am not the kind of person who changes, is not being honest about themselves. They are defending a construction. But here is what Watts offers. Alongside the self that is not fixed, cannot be permanently broken, cannot be permanently defined, cannot be permanently trapped. If you are a process rather than a thing, then no failure is final. No identity is a cage. No version of yourself is the last word on who you are. The freedom Watts points toward is not freedom from change. It is the freedom that comes from finally being what you actually are, which is change itself. Asterisk, every strategy you have for dealing with pain is making it worse. Not because you are weak, because the strategy itself, the attempt to separate yourself from what you feel, is structurally incapable of working. Watts saw this with unusual clarity. The thing you call suffering is rarely just the pain. It is the pain plus the desperate effort to not be in it. And that second layer, the resistance, the bracing, the internal running, is often more exhausting than the original wound. Think about what actually happens when fear arrives. The feeling comes, and immediately something else activates. A voice, a posture, a strategy. Name it, contain it, explain it, escape it. You call it anxiety, and by naming it, you have already tried to put distance between yourself and it. You think about why you feel it, what caused it, how long it will last. You monitor it, negotiate with it. Tell yourself you shouldn't feel it. All of this activity, all of this frantic mental labor is the I, trying to stand outside the experience and manage it from a safe distance. But there is no safe distance. You cannot remove your head from a headache the way you remove your hand from a flame. Watts draws a distinction. Most therapeutic frameworks miss entirely. The problem is not that you feel pain. The problem is that you feel pain and simultaneously feel an I that is separate from the pain and cannot tolerate it. That split between the experience is what turns ordinary suffering into torment. Because now you are not just in pain. You are in pain and fighting yourself for being in pain, which produces more pain, which requires more fighting. Stop trying to get out. Not because escape is morally wrong, but because escape is impossible, and the attempt is what sustains the agony. When you are fully aware of fear without naming it, without calling it bad, without trying to be someone who is not afraid, something shifts. The second layer of suffering, the layer made of resistance, begins to dissolve. What remains is the original feeling, which is almost always more bearable than the war you were waging against it. A life lived at one remove from experience is not a protected life. It is a missed life. The security you were buying with your absence was never real. The moment passed anyway, and you are not in it. The practice Watts points toward is not meditation in the formal sense. It is simpler and more relentless than that. It is the repeated act of noticing when you have left the present, when you are grieving the past or rehearsing the future, and returning not with discipline, with recognition. The moment you see that you are other than here, you are already back. Awareness of absence is itself a form of presence. When something ends, as things will end, as they've always ended, as they are ending right now, in ways too slow to notice. Resist the impulse to locate the loss somewhere permanent. Ask instead, what was actually there? What was real in it? Whether the ending changes, and it doesn't. The river was real while it ran. The running was the point. If something in this video has unsettled something in you, a belief about permanence, about security, about what you've been protecting, and why that unsettlement is not a problem too, resolve it as the beginning of something. What? Spent a lifetime pointing at a door that most people spend their lives decorating the wall around. Leave a comment below about what you're holding onto that you already know you cannot keep. The answer will tell you more about yourself than any plan you've made for the future.